Computer. Perfect. Okay, guys, welcome everyone to the July meeting. We're going to talk about the Brewing for BJCP competitions. Thank you, Karen and Kaitlyn from Holidaily for joining us today.
Heck yeah.
So wanted to talk a little bit about, both kids have now re-entered the home as we get started. So I wanted to talk a little bit about why you would enter BJCP competitions and what they are. Beer Judge Certification Program kind of creates the style guidelines for homebrew competitions that are sanctioned by the BJCP. AHA national competition would be the granddaddy of them all, and then that goes all the way down to state and local levels. Hi, do you want to say hello really quickly, Rosalie?
Hello.
Hi, Rosalie. Hi, Rosalie.
Yep, and then there's Leo, and we're going to ask them both to go play outside.
Hi,
or
Leo.
In one of the kids' rooms, as long as it's not. Yep, just as long as it's not piano.
Okay,
go ahead,
what's
guys.
going on?
All right, great. She's very well behaved in these meetings. She sat through an entire one of them in the back of Groundbreaker recently.
That's awesome.
Okay, so what are the reasons to enter these competitions? And I came up in my mind with three big motivations. Who doesn't like winning medals? You win lots of medals if you do these things. If they're small enough competitions, you might sweep categories. I mean, it's fun, it's rewarding, you get that validation, it's great. They look good hanging up in your home brewery. But what I've transitioned to mostly for me is awareness for the club and for gluten-free beer. I had kind of given up on competitions as a barley brewer, just wasn't really getting much back in the way of feedback that I was looking for anymore. And when I started the club, I said, there's not a category for gluten-free beer, and it would sure be great if there were. So I wanted to start entering competitions, try and medal in place in some things, get the club's name out there, because usually there's a club affiliation that gets published with people who win medals. So that gets the club's name out there. And the more gluten-free beer that we put in front of people in the homebrew community, specifically judges, the more that people are going. There comes the third kid. Bye-bye. The more that we put the gluten-free beer in front of people, the more people realize, hey, like you can do really good gluten-free beer. In fact, the reason that the Oregon State Fair is going to have a gluten-free category for us this year is because I entered beers, they tasted them, they said these are actually very good, and then they saw how big the club had become and decided maybe we can make something of this. So that's a very good thing, is to raise awareness in gluten-free brewing, and maybe we can get our own category. And then really the biggest, most important is that you get feedback on your beers. It's important to get feedback on your beers. You become a better brewer by seeing people's notes, and they'll say the things that, you know, maybe you should tweak some fermentation temperatures. You know, this tastes a little off in this way or that way. So those are the big motivations I found for entering them. I need her to stop yelling. So BJCP, the way that they set up these competitions is that there's a 2015 style guide. Almost all of the competitions now have switched over to the 2015 style guide. For years and years and years, it was the 2008 style guide. Just excuse me a moment.
How dare you, they're loud and crazy on a Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, she found exactly which button to push for Dad, so she's doing it.
Perfect.
So that 2015 style guideline really does seem to be the standard that people are going by. 2008 was the standard for a long time. People were very reluctant to give it up because the 2015 guideline is a huge departure from the 2008, which everybody was kind of pretty content with. It needed to grow a little bit. But study up on that 2015 style guide. And then a great book is Jamil Zainasheff wrote a book called Brewing Classic Styles, and it was set to the 2008 style guide. But he had an award-winning recipe for every category in the 2008 guideline.
Nice.
And it was a great way as a barley brewer for me to get familiar with the style guide, figure out some recipes. And if you are pretty good at translating or transposing recipes from barley beer to gluten-free beer, that Jamil Zainasheff book is a great way to get some great recipes that are sort of center of the style guideline. And that's a great way to get started. And then what other notes did I have here about it? So tips for entering competitions. So we're a little bit limited. We've talked a lot about the fact that there is not a dedicated gluten-free category. So in most BJCP competitions, we're going to be going up against barley beers in every category, unless they carve out a special exception like the Oregon State Fair did for us this year by creating a dedicated gluten-free specialty designation. Even alternative grains, alternative fermentables, which is 31A is for grains, 31B is for alternative sugars. Those competition subcategories, you're still going to be going up against barley beers, as we've seen. If you do a beer that's typically done with wheat and you brew it with rye instead, that's an alternative grain. If you do a barley wine and you make it with rye, that's an alternative grain. But in our mind as gluten-free brewers, grains that don't normally get brewed with should be the alternative grains, alternative to traditional brewing grains. Barley, wheat, and rye are traditional brewing grains, and in my mind, they're not alternatives. I can see how those are specialty beers or experimental beers, which is also a category of its own, and maybe those rye barley wines should be going in there rather than in the alternative grains, alternative fermentables. And that's a conversation that I'm trying to start up with the BJCP this year, is we should have a dedicated, level playing field if we're going to be brewing with each other. And also, it's the beer judge certification program. They want people to become beer judges. We are physically unable to do that in their current standards. And I think that probably that would be a big motivation for them to carve out an exception. Would be, hey, what if you could judge this one category plus cider plus mead? Would you be, interested in becoming judges? And I think that that's something that would motivate both us to become judges and them to allow a category carve out. So, so that the categories that are most suited for us are still probably alternative grains, alternative fermentables. And then there's no rule that says that you can't enter into a native style. So if you brewed an IPA, there's no reason you couldn't just throw it into IPAs and see how it does against the barley beers. And I would personally recommend doing that in subcategories where where the grain differences wouldn't be perceived as a defect. So if it's IPA, you're going to be pretty heavily masked by your hop. People probably aren't going to pick apart your malt selection. In Pilsner, if you entered Pilsner with Maris Otter, it's going to stick out like a sore thumb, and that's still barley. If you throw a millet beer into Pilsner, you're going to get found out really fast. It might taste delicious, but it's probably going to be perceived as a fermentation flaw, or they'll say, oh, it tastes stale, things like that. I would recommend staying out of the malt forward ones. Hey, it's your turn. I would stay out of the malt forward categories with gluten-free beers, because it's too easy to perceive those differences. It's not that it's a flaw, it's not that they could taste better, honestly, but you're going to get found out under one of these things is not like the other. Because when they're running a table, it's basically like when you sit down at a brewery and order a flight of beers, and it shows you your position in your flight on your score sheet. There's a position in the flight right there that will tell you, hey, you were the 3rd out of 4 in this flight. So if they go, barley beer, whoa, that guy messed up. Barley beer, it's gonna stand out, unless you find one that you can kind of fly under the radar on. And that would be my suggestion there. I've gotten away a little bit with Dad's Red into the amber ale category, and I think it's just because there's so much sweetness to the beer. I haven't placed with that one yet, but I've scored high 30s enough to be like, hey, it contended, it did well. Oh, we didn't talk at all about the points and how that works. So there's 50 points available. Nobody gets 50. So don't sweat it if you've never scored a 50 beer, because nobody does ever. But basically they break it down to where 45 through 50 is outstanding. I think my record for a barley beer was 45.5. Like that's top. And then excellent is where most placing beers fall into, which would be that 38 to 44. Those are the beers that are winning subcategories. And then very good would be considered 30 to 37. Definitely pat yourself on the back if you're scoring in the 30s. Good beers, 21 to 29. You may be missing, it says missing the mark on style and or minor flaws. You probably had some sort of fermentation problem there, or an ingredient selection was a bad decision. Fair would be 14 through 20. You're definitely having problems with that beer. And 0 to 13, you definitely had an infected bottle or something like that happen to you. And the way that the points are awarded are on aroma, which is 12 of your available points. Appearance, a lot of people really sweat crystal clear beer or really sweat the head on a beer. It is 3 points. It is 3 whole points out of 50 on the appearance of the beer. So if you have a sludgy looking beer, it might be aesthetically unpleasing, but as long as it's not affecting the flavor, you're A-okay on that. Flavor is the biggest piece of the pie. It's 20 out of 50 points. Mouthfeel is important. So we get knocked a lot for thin beers. We get knocked a lot for disappearing head retention, which I think sometimes bleeds into this one. These are humans judging the thing, so they may not be able to differentiate between, hey, the head retention failed and this is a thin beer. Because you can have definitely a beer with 20 points left of residual sugar, and they'll say, mouthfeel's off because the head disappeared. We also get hit a lot on like dryness. And then overall impression, this category in the scoring is 10 available points. And it really is just for the judge to talk about how much they enjoyed drinking the beer. Like if they can realize like, hey, you put a lot of work into this, it's technically it's pretty solid beer, or hey, you got creative with this one, and they'll award you some points there. And it has 4 check boxes here which say, I would finish this sample, I would drink a pint of this beer, I would pay money for this beer, please send me the recipe. I've definitely had judges pull me aside and say, hey, your beer was the one that I drank when we were done judging, which is a nice thing to hear from somebody. That means you did well in technical merit when they pull you aside and were like, hey, we finished all the judging and I grabbed a bottle of yours. I would pay money for that beer. That's a nice thing to hear. So those are the major categories on how the points are awarded. So the things that you should really be focusing on are the flavor. And in the BJCP guidelines, it will show you where you should fall as far as your gravities, your SRM, and your IBUs. Because flavor is 20 of the points, and people are drinking 1 or 2 ounce samples of your beer against other 1 and 2 ounce samples, I strongly suggest aiming for the upper end of all the subcategories, because you want that overall impression to be a solid one. You want your beer to stand out from the others. Balance is important, but definitely, if you can aim toward the upper end of those subcategories, and if you're entering something like alternative grains, alternative fermentables, if you've brewed a wit, Stuart, and you're thinking like, oh, I'm going to enter this into 31A, but as a wit, definitely aim for, the top end of what wit might be, so that they can identify it easily as, oh, this is definitely a wit. And you will have to, when you enter 31A or B, you'll have to name what its native category would have been. So if you're entering an amber ale, you have to say this is a gluten-free amber ale, and you have to list what the alternative grains are. As I learned from a miserable experience at NHC last year, I didn't declare, I just said it was gluten-free, and I thought that because it's gluten-free, that should insinuate that it was alternative grains. Wrong. You have to say brewed with millet, buckwheat, and rice. You can't just hope that they understand what gluten-free means. Mm-hmm. So that's really all I had for just the sort of preamble to what BJCP competitions are. And I know that Karen has a slide deck that she wanted to run through with some of notes from Holidaily. And should I turn it over to you now?
Sure.
All right, I'll do that.
Right.
Oh, you're going to do the share, so I don't
want to share. So
I'm going to mute my family.
Okay. All right. If we could only do that all the time, right? So I wanted to introduce myself real quick because I haven't officially met most, but I'm Karen Hertz, and I founded Holidaily. We opened in February of 2006 here in Golden, Colorado, and we're a certified dedicated gluten-free brewery. And we're growing a lot. We're just really focused on Colorado right now, but we have a tap room in Golden, and then we distribute 4 beers, 3 year round, and then a seasonal that rotates. Kaitlyn is here today too, and she does all of our marketing and PR. So she's on board today too with us. We put together a deck. We have some information on in terms of shipping beer when you're doing a competition, but we also have some information about a competition that we're going to put on that we're really excited about to share with you guys, and some things that are coming up for GABF that Holidaily is putting together, not only for the commercial brewers, but also the home brewers. So I just want to share all that with you. So let me see if I can technologically get it figured out. Let me know if you can see.
Yep.
Can you see it? Yes. Good. All right. And a little more quick background on Holidaily. I started it because I was working at Coors for about 10 years in distribution. So I was in the beer industry. I have an MBA in entrepreneurial studies. And then I'm a 2-time cancer survivor. First was melanoma, and second was thyroid cancer and Hashimoto's thyroiditis. And part of that second treatment, in addition to surgery and radiation, was saying I needed to be gluten-free, and loved beer and worked at Coors and live in Colorado. So that's really what motivated me to start the brewery. All right, so we're excited to go through this with you today. Any questions, feel free to ask. Kaitlyn, interrupt whatever I forget. Here we go. We are putting together for GABF the very first ever gluten-free beer conference for all the commercial brewers. It's like a baby craft brewers conference, but just for the gluten-free breweries, which is really cool. So we figured hopefully most of them are coming out for GABF to Colorado anyway, so we can just host it the day before GABF starts on that Wednesday. And we've invited every dedicated gluten-free brewery that there is. Hopefully we get a good turnout. So far it seems like we're getting a good crowd to come out, and it's just that one day before. But part of it that day before is that we would love for the gluten-free homebrew community to submit beers to us, because we're gonna host a competition that afternoon where all of the commercial brewers and their staff get to be the judges. And really the point of it on the commercial brewer side is so that we all get to sit on the other side of the table, and we get to learn about what it feels like to be a judge and how quick you go through it. And Joe, you were talking about 1 ounce at a time and 2 ounces at a time, and how do you stand out? So we're really hoping that it teaches us how to be a judge and then better be a competitor in different competitions. So really what we want to do is go through that. We're going to talk about shipping beer, and then we have a plan for the winner of the competition. So let me roll through. The gluten-free beer conference. We just opened a brand new brewery. We have our tap room, but we opened a production brewery across the street in the last couple months, and this is a picture of that. We have a mash press, and we have 600 barrels of fermentation right now with some room to grow. So it's been a huge jump for us, but we're really excited to host the event at this new facility because it's the first of it. This facility is the first of its kind in the country for gluten-free, and we want to show the other brewers and share what we've learned, and think it'll just be a great place to host this event. Other things that we're going to collaborate with the breweries on is messages as a group about gluten-free versus gluten-reduced, just to be sure we're all out communicating the same thing to everybody and really educating people the same way, so that it feels like we're making more progress on one person saying something and me saying something else, and then we're confusing everybody. So trying to come up with a group message around that. We're also doing other trainings with PR and social media. We have a sensory training. Twyla from Grouse is coming in and doing a sensory training with us. And then at the end, we're going to do this beer competition. So part of that, I think I can move to the next one. Get gluten freaky with it is the beer competition, but what we're really asking is for homebrewers to come up with whatever it does. There's not a particular style. It just has to be dedicated gluten-free. We have a professional judge walking us through all of it as a group. And really we put together BJCP some guidelines. It can be any style. Like I said, it has to be gluten-free. So you can use that BJCP that Joe was talking about categories. We know it's gluten-free, so really we're focused on the different categories. If you want to do a red or a wit or a blonde or a stout, great. The homebrewers have to be dedicated gluten-free, and the beer has to be completely gluten-free. Gluten-reduced is not welcome. This is not a cider or a mead. This is a dedicated gluten-free beer competition. We have amount that we need, sizes of bottles or cans. This is free. We just wanted to get exposure to you guys as homebrewers, and then knowledge to all of us as far as judging goes. We do have a deadline for when it needs to arrive, and I believe it's September 18th. Mm-hmm. All your photos are in front of my slide. And then 2 entries per person is where we're capping it. So if you have 2 beers that you love, we would love to get both of them. Any questions about that?
I have one quick question. Say one of our members left a whole bunch of beer and then moved to Australia. Would somebody be able to enter those beers on that member's behalf?
For sure.
Okay,
sure.
Great.
Awesome.
Heck yeah. Heck yeah. All right. Little more things continued. If we get late entries, we're not going to be like, oh, we're not going to taste your beer, but you won't be able to win. We just are trying to hit the September 18th deadline so we can be organized on our end before GABF. Again, gluten-reduced mead and cider is not a part of this. We just want to do beer. And then in terms of an award, the winner, Holidaily is committing to brewing it on a commercial-sized level, whichever beer we pick as kind of best in show. And we're going to ask other GF breweries to do the same if they'd like to, but we'll brew it, we'll put it on tap in our tap room, and we'll ship some back to whoever the winner is too. If people want to come out and brew with us, that's awesome too. But we'll ask the other commercial brewers to do the same if they're interested in it, but we will definitely have it on tap in our tap room in Golden, which will be fun. And we'll promote it. Kaitlyn's really good at social media if you follow our social media stuff. All right. Here's some shipping information. Like I said, it needs to arrive by September 18th. It's going to go to Kaitlyn. A couple of things that we need on each bottle is your name and your email and phone number. Your style, according to the BJCP, like we talked about. We put an example in there. The beer name, if you have a fun beer name for it, let's use it. And it could be really fun once we get it on tap. And then a list of ingredients. You don't need to say your exact recipe. It's kind of like what Joe was talking about. We know it's gluten-free, but just say millet, buckwheat, sorghum, hops, water, yeast. I mean, that's fine, but a general list of ingredients just to fully make us feel comfortable with the fact that these are absolutely gluten-free.
And may I ask another quick question there? As far as eligible ingredients, what about it's always the question, first of all, yeast, second of all, oats?
Yeah, that's a great question. We don't brew with oats at Holidaily because of that concern in particular. This is a good question. We need to think about this. What are your thoughts?
Yeah.
Anybody else on either of that?
It's a 50-50 within the club. People who think oats are okay. I don't use them personally for that same reason, just because of the fear of cross-contamination, and buying Bob's Red Mill's guaranteed gluten-free ones are quite expensive, even here in Bob's country. And then the yeast, I'm a strident, like, no liquid yeast supporter, but it's, your facility is one thing that I consider. Like, I know that you guys got a certification to maintain. I've seen it show up on the cans lately. So I'm concerned about, people sending beers that were brewed on undiluted liquid yeast.
Yeah. JP, do you have thoughts about that at all?
Yeah, I absolutely do. We're also an oat-free brewery just because we have so many of our gluten-free customers that say they have a problem with Avennin. I personally don't, and hope to taste the beers that are present in October and maybe brew them here. But I stay away from it. Like, I stay away from oats like the plague.
Yeah, us too.
We don't even put them in any of the food that we make, and we have like a semi-full menu. So.
Yeah. So I think we can add, Kaitlyn, we can add to this and say no oats.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that's maybe some of your hosts, your guest judges. I know, like Dan, for example, I don't know his RSVP status, but he would not be able to participate because he's got a severe oat reaction. He gets like the movie Hitch if he has oats.
Well, not only, cross-contamination is an issue with oats, but so is the actual structure of the protein in there.
Yeah, he's got a legit allergy.
Not gluten, it's very structurally similar. So I think.
Yeah, and we won't be able to brew whoever, wins the competition. So I think it's a safe.
Exactly.
No oats.
Oh, your facility is strictly oat-free. So if if an oat-containing recipe won, they wouldn't be able to brew on your system. Got it.
We can't keep our promises that way. So yes, let's eliminate oats. We will note that on any of our press and PR about it.
Yeah.
And then yeast, we need to be sure that the yeast is gluten-free as well.
Yeah, the issue that the club has been talking a lot about, Karen, is like the number of generations removed from a liquid gluten containing yeast source.
Right.
And I know at my brewery we don't mess with it at all. But there's a lot of discussion in zero tolerance about how many generations. The other thing that I'd throw out there is home malted grains or home crystallized grains. You might want to consider whether those are acceptable or whether it should be kept to commercially available gluten-free malt.
What would the concern there be, JP, if they're doing the Ed Golden method in a non-gluten-free kitchen?
Yeah, that's a possibility. Also, repeatability for Holidaily and anybody else who brews it. Whether or not they're going to be able to come up with 400 pounds of Ed Golden method malt.
Well, Twyla's going to be there. She's gonna work that out.
We got Twyla for that.
She'll do custom malting for that batch.
Sounds great.
I just signed her up for it. She doesn't even know.
Sounds great.
All right, we need to think about a couple of those things and how to word it just to be sure we're real specific about it, but that's why we needed to talk through it with you guys. And basically the answer is we will have people that are judging that are the most sensitive celiac you get.
Yeah.
So beer better not make anybody sick. So we're going to put some guidelines around that. Thank you for some clarity, and we'll add to some of that. and this crew knows now what we're looking for. But that yeast, we have to be real careful with that. I think we can repeat things maybe with Twyla's help, but that may be solvable. We just want to be sure it's in a dedicated gluten-free facility.
Right.
Okay.
Cool.
Good question. Yeah.
Can I ask one more question too?
Yeah.
Not all of the zero tolerance members are like dedicated equipment level of gluten-free. So that language might confuse some people. You know, so and that's to say that some members used to brew with gluten beer and haven't replaced their equipment.
Yeah.
So I know for us at Beerly, we don't have any stuff that we used to brew with back before I was gluten-free. It's all gone.
Yeah.
Everything we have is dedicated, and that's part of our brand. But not all home brewers that might enter are in that same boat.
Well, what we can do is ask them to disclose that on the info that they tape to the bottle. And then if that's the case, we can do testing on that beer. So not test all of the beer, but just if there's a concern, do some testing on it.
Good point.
Or
Good idea. Okay.
That could be a workaround.
All good points. Cool. Nothing's easy. It all gets so complicated.
Oh no, gluten-free people are a pain in the ass. They're a real bother.
High maintenance. We are high maintenance. All right. These are just some things on packaging and shipping beer when you're doing a competition that can be really helpful. Use a sturdy double-walled box or 2 boxes, one inside the other. Lots and lots of filler material, bubble wrap. The styrofoam stuff works great. Make sure no glass is touching. That's a key one. Make sure nothing moves when you shake it. There are styrofoam wine shippers that are found on Amazon that can be used that are really great for shipping beers. What we generally do when we mail beer is we line the inside of the box with a trash bag. And the reason being is if something does leak, hopefully it contains it. If you don't do that and it starts leaking, they're guaranteed to grab that box and pull it out, one, or you're just making a big mess. So really, I do that even traveling. Here's a traveler tip with beer. Put your beer in a trash bag, because I have been rolling my roller suitcase through the airport at CBC with beer spilling out of my suitcase. Just so classy. So the trash bag is good for traveling and for also inside of your package when you go to wrap your package up. Ship it UPS or FedEx. We find at the brewery it's real easy. The guy that picks up beer or picks up packages doesn't care that it's beer. But if you don't want to get questioned, you can even print out a FedEx line ahead of time, put it on your box, go to a FedEx drop place and just drop it. And then nobody asks about it too much. Don't use USPS because it is a federal offense to be shipping alcohol. And then track your package. Pay for the extra to track it just so you know where it's at, especially for a competition. You just want to know that it made it. So those were kind of just some thoughts that we put together as far as shipping beer. Luckily for GABF, we don't have to ship our beer very far. We drive it down to Louisville, which is like a 20-minute drive, but JP might have better shipping for further distance ideas than we do, but these seem to work for us, and just a couple things to think about. Yeah.
I've recently discovered that I use the 500 milliliter Euro bottles, and I don't know if anybody wants to change. By the way, this is our new first in the industry IPA that's going into bottles this week. Very little body. These 500 ml Euro bottles actually are the wine shippers specifically are designed, if you turn them over, to fit this bottle exactly. And I didn't know that and discovered that when I connected to a wine shipping company. And they said, oh, you've got those bottles perfect. We don't even need to do anything except stick them in the wine shippers. So
perfect.
It's a better story if you got drunk and put the bottle in upside down and it was you know, a stroke of genius.
Yeah, that would be a better story.
can neither confirm nor deny.
Well, the shipping tips are very important. That's stuff that folks have been asking for a while in the club. And I think Ben in particular was wanting answers on that. And I almost always enter locally, just because Oregon's got a ton of competitions and we've got the state fair and stuff like that. So my first experience with shipping beer, other than to my dad for his birthday, was shipping beers to BJCP and sending them, all the way out to, I think it was in Rhode Island this year, and to the AHA National Convention. And I wasn't really sure what to do. Like I know that I did your method. I had learned from you by receiving a lot of guys. I'm talking here. I had learned from you guys to wrap it in a Glad bag around all of my packaging, because I've received shipments from you guys. And I also, I did use UPS, which turned out to be very fortunate because FedEx rejected all packages going to the NHC distribution site. This year they started rejecting them, and it was a huge headache for the AHA. They had to get in touch with FedEx, and it was a state and local type of law. And I think they finally got it all cleared up, but they had to write exceptions to deadlines, and there were mass emails going out about FedEx turning these shipments around. And people, when you think about it, some of those beers, for us, it's like, oh, I brewed a beer and 2 weeks later it was done and I shipped it in. But at NHC, some of those are barrel-aged beers that have been sitting for 3 years, and this is my last one from my Solera that I pulled for this competition, and they made it to the finals of NHC, and those beers got disqualified or rerouted, and it was a mess. So that was FedEx. If I have a preference, I'd probably go with UPS just because of that reason, that FedEx started rejecting those beers. But it was much huger scale. There's 1,000 beers going to NHC. So
yeah, exactly. It's just the luck that we've had so far. That's the way it's been. It doesn't look pretty when it gets there, but at least the beer's safe is really kind of the point. I think Kaitlyn has to step off.
Yeah, I have to jet somewhere to be at 4, but I will watch the rest of the recording. And my contact info is on the last slide. So Joe, once you send this out, if anyone has questions about the competition or GABF or any of that, they can reach out to me.
Great. Yeah, we'll forward your information. And I think that we've got a good time to ramp this up. Your deadline's not until September 18th. So that gives us maybe, a couple of weeks here to hype it and a couple of weeks for people to start brewing. And I hope that we get a lot of entries, because a lot of people have been really itching for that level playing field, to get out and show their beers. And I appreciate you guys providing that for us.
This will be fun.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And take the rest of it away, but nice to meet you all.
All right. Thanks, Kaitlyn. I appreciate it. And it's nice meeting you.
You too. Bye.
All right. Are there any other questions about shipping or any other thoughts or any of that? Okay.
Oh, yeah, I did. I didn't see it in the slides. What is the date for the conference and the judging?
So it's that Wednesday before GABF, which is October
2nd or 3rd.
I'll double check. October 2nd.
All right. I think I'm going to go visit my dad at that point, and if I can take in the conferences. Okay. So maybe another question. The competition was free. Is the conference also available to homebrewers, and is there a fee aligned with that?
So the conference is just a commercial brewer deal, but we have other things going on that are open to homebrewers. So we're going to run through, I think I have a slide coming up.
Oh, okay.
There's other things open to homebrewers coming up. So this is it. If there are any questions, reach out to Kaitlyn. That's her email. And you can reach out to me anytime too. What we are going to do, so October 2nd is that meeting. October 3rd is we're doing a collaboration brew. And really that's just an open house in our taproom brewery. And homebrewers are welcome. Commercial brewers are welcome. And we're all just going to brew and hang out that day. There's a group of the commercial brewers that want to get in on helping us with a recipe or coming up with an idea. If there's home brewers that want to do that too, could totally join in on that. Other things that week, we're open every day that week. We have specials, new beer tappings, and then we're going to be holding tours all week of the new production facility. So any home brewer is welcome to, of course, any of that.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, I think I found an excuse to go visit Dad, who lives in the hills.
Perfect.
Outside of you guys. He works in Golden, actually. His business is in Golden.
Oh, really? Awesome.
Yeah. He bid on your doors and windows in commercial storefront. I don't know if he got it. I think he probably would have told me if he would have gotten it.
Or he's secretly drinking beer, not telling you.
He would tell me if it was gluten-free.
Possible. Hold on. Sorry, that's my doggo.
Who let the dogs out?
Sorry, God, the kids, the dogs. Welcome to my life.
You know, that is definitely that like craft brew life is a lot of dogs, a lot of kids. Like if you open a craft brewery and it's not kid and dog friendly, you're probably shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah, a lot of people don't like it though.
The dog thing?
Yeah, the dog or the kid thing.
Yeah, that's true. The kid thing too. I saw somebody writing an article about how millennials shouldn't go to Disneyland without kids. And it's like, we're uptight about that now. Like that we're going to have 20 and 30-year-olds at Disneyland without kids. It's like, I didn't have kids when I was 25 years old. I would love to have gone to Disneyland.
Right.
Sounds fun.
Exactly.
Lighten up.
Yep.
Here for the kids.
So I think that is all I had.
Okay. Yeah. It's rare that we end before our allotted time. It's increasingly rare when we don't meet at Groundbreaker. Yeah. When we meet at Groundbreaker, people like to hang out and drink, but I've found in the summertime for sure these to be a much better option doing online.
Yep.
Cool. Well, Karen, thank you very much. We will do our best to push this out to the masses. I think it's super exciting.
Submit beers, everybody.
You want a pet dog here? You've got to get your pet dog over here. What's your dog's name? Warfer.
Warfer.
Sure. She's the best name maker. That's why I asked that question. She comes up with all the best original names.
It's a baby dog, and that dog's not a stuffed animal.
What?
It's not a stuffed animal.
No, of course not. No, I bought that dog for you at Timberline Lodge when we went up there.
But it's not a stuffy.
No, it's not a stuffy. That's for real.
Deal.
Yeah, everybody knows that. All right, say bye-bye, Rosalie. And Warfer.
Bye.
Bye, Warfer.
Hey, thank you very much. If Kaitlyn has specific art and design that we can push out to the club for the competition, we'll do that.
All right, let's do it.
Excellent. Cool. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.